For the past 30 years, the leadership of the North Carolina State Bar has thought it wise to have a confidential program of outreach to all North Carolina lawyers. What was the original need for this program? How has it evolved and expanded? What does this program say today to North Carolina lawyers, and how does it affect you? The Bar has believed that if the profession is to be self-regulatory, it needs to be healthy, that the public is best served and best protected if lawyers are healthy physically and emotionally. But these lofty goals did not automatically lead to the establishment of the Lawyer Assistance Program. Rather, the program evolved much more organically by the inspiration and selfless action of individual lawyers who were concerned about their peers. The story of the Lawyer Assistance Program is the story of how this happened. It's about a lot of unsung heroes. It's about how the profession itself began to learn about the disease of addiction and the prevalence of depression. Let's let this story unfold, and in the process, hopefully you will learn more about the quality of what it means to be a lawyer in North Carolina, about the commitment of the Lawyer Assistance Program to you, and the commitment of the volunteers who participate in this program. And in the process, hopefully you will know more about what it means to deal with the potential potholes of addiction and depression that we all face in our profession. And you will be able to chart a course for yourself to avoid those potholes when possible, and to help each other. It's a dynamic and exciting story, and part of the heritage that supports you as a lawyer. Let's begin.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody here. It's really a lot of fun for me to have 7 of the past chairs of the Lawyers Assistance Program, and Bob Sink, who is president of the State Bar, was so instrumental in expanding the Lawyers Assistance Program. It's fun for me to have a chance to hear a little bit of the history that led to where we are today in our 31st year as a program. What I wanted to do at the start is give you all a bit of a snapshot about where the program is and just how it's doing. Unfortunately, the demand for our services remains pretty high. As of the end of the first quarter of this year, we had 636 open files, and so that's 636 attorneys we're working with. And about 282 of those attorneys are in the PALS program, which you all know deals with substance abuse, and about 354 are in the FRIENDS program, which deals with issues related to depression and other mental health issues. We continue to have a really good success rate in the LAP program. Since the year 2000, we've closed over 900 files. Our success rate for addiction is 86%, which is pretty remarkable. And for mental health issues, it's 83%, which is also a really, really high number. We're able to do that because of our great staff. We have Don and Ed and Tawanda going around the state working with lawyers. But we couldn't do it without our volunteer group. We currently have 136 PALS volunteers around the state and 96 FRIENDS volunteers around the state. So we have over 200 lawyers and PALS volunteers who are willing to spend their time working with other lawyers, and they're extraordinarily effective. We support 16 support groups that meet regularly throughout the state. They're an important part of our program. And we continue to sponsor CLE presentations every quarter. We probably do 10 or 15 every quarter all around the state, and that educational component is a very important part of what we do. But what I really want to hear about is more about the past history of the program and how we got to where we are today. And so what I'd like to do is kind of just hear from each of you about what some of your reminiscences are of the program during the time that you served as the chair.
Well, it was clear to me from the very beginning that PALS was a fantastic program, and being a strong believer in the efficacy of recovery, I certainly wanted to do everything I could to support you and to support the program. And we made, I think, during those first couple of years, some pretty important modifications and improvements to the program. I know that one of them was getting substance abuse recognized as a proper subject for CLEs. At first, it was not a mandatory CLE to take, but I think maybe by the time I got seconded as the president, that it was mandatory.
During that time, we got the state bar to approve the CLE hours for that so that people could get ethics credit. And Don started gathering people that were members of PALS to make some of the presentations. We began the annual PALS 12-step retreat. In the first year that was held in Hendersonville, Billy Hogue, a attorney from Louisville, ran it. Changed my life. I still remember best what Billy said. The way he introduces himself is, my name's Billy, I ain't much, but I'm all I think about. And I started thinking, you know, that pretty much talks about me. So big help there. And then the next year, we had the attorneys programs from Tennessee, South Carolina, and Virginia to join us. And that program is ongoing. We started the program to try to convince the members of the state bar that we could help you a lot with your grievances. You got a lot of people that you're sending straight to the grievance committee that have substance abuse problems or depression problems, and if you could bypass that grievance committee temporarily at least, we think we might be able to get these people on track.
In 1998, I was president of the bar, and we then decided to expand the program into mental health area, and the division of PALS and Friends arose under the umbrella of the Lawyers Assistance Program, so in a Lawyer Assistance Committee. So we've sort of seen it evolve, at least from that point, and I'm delighted to be here, and they're celebrating 30 years of service.
Well, I'm Sarah Davis, and I got appointed to the LAP board in probably 2002, 2003. I was like some of the rest of you. Was not a person in recovery, and I'm not exactly sure why I got put on the LAP board. But it was an enormous education for me. And one of the things that was very educational is finding out about how AA fits into recovery and how important the AA 12-step program is to recovering alcoholics and addicts, and people who are not in recovery don't understand the importance of AA in the recovery of alcoholics. And the bar leadership didn't understand enough about maybe the nuts and bolts of everyday work of LAP to know that we weren't promoting AA. We didn't have anything to do with AA. We just, pointed people to recovery programs.
There were a number of African American lawyers who had had issues with the state bar and had lost their licenses or otherwise had their license to practice law compromised. So I certainly was concerned and very willing to try to address that. And one of the things that we did during my tenure was to focus as much as we could on reaching the African American community of lawyers in North Carolina. The final thing that I will note regarding my tenure was I recall there continuing to be an effort to reach law students. As a person who teaches one course at North Carolina Central's Law School in professional responsibility, I have made an effort in particular to incorporate that, or at least information about the Lawyer Assistance Program, including PALS and Friends, as part of that course that I teach.
one other thing that occurred while I was chair, and it was an unfortunate husband-wife suicide. It was a lawyer and his wife, right after being served with a subpoena from the state bar to review his trust records. And he could not apparently face what that was going to mean for him and his wife, and she couldn't face it either, and there was a double suicide. And Don said, maybe this is a place where we can help, that, you know, to try to prevent this kind of tragedy and establish a protocol where a person who is being accused and is seeing the other side, the shame and the exposure that they had concealed and what it meant to them in their life, and, you know, a radical change, to have some sort of protocol, that to have someone available to be able to meet with them and tell them, you know, there's life after this.
When it comes to minority attorneys, especially, you know, who feel like a lot of times they may be the first ones in their family to even go to college, and then to go to law school and become lawyers and this type of thing, and they've always been successful, and they also know that you know, it's like they are carrying the whole weight of their family and of their community, of their race on their back. You know, that's the way they feel, and so they can't be a failure, and you know, and they can't be as weak as to have a problem with alcohol or drugs. And so the denial really sets in even more so. And they feel like that, okay, here you are out here, you say you're gonna help me, but the way you're gonna help me is to expose something that I see as being a weakness, as I see as being, yeah, you say it's an illness, but I say I'm not really meeting up. And if I'm not meeting up to my own standards, I'm probably not meeting up to the standards that that my employers might have if I'm working for one of these larger law firms, or just from what my peers that I might practice with or be in court with or this type of thing might have.
My understanding is around 1979, the North Carolina Supreme Court issued a ruling setting up PALS as a committee of the state bar, PALS being an acronym for Positive Action for Lawyers. And at that, from that was the beginning of it. That was the birth of PALS, so to speak. And the two people most prominently in putting this committee together and getting it started were Bobby James, who was then the director of the North Carolina State Bar, whose office, of course, was in Raleigh, and Lester Chalmers, who had previously been with the Attorney General's office. And Lester came to Charlotte and made a talk at a recovery meeting, a 12-step meeting, and I heard his life story, and it was truly remarkable. And in the audience that night was a fella who was in recovery, like Lester, who had been tried and convicted by Lester when he was a district attorney in eastern North Carolina. And it was kind of ironic, both of them ended up in recovery. I thought that was kind of an amusing aside. But I'd say that the two quarterbacks on this thing were Bobby James and Lester Chalmers.
You know, Lester Chalmers had a wonderful personality and just was the kind of guy that truly attracted people around him. And he certainly attracted me, I guess, almost like a butterfly to the candlelight. But hey, I want to mention probably a person that's been forgotten along with just Lester, and that's Lester's wife. She was a tremendous asset to him. She was very, very devoted to PALS and the concept of PALS. She was an active member of Al-Anon and also was a member of a big book study group in AA. And she knew she could quote the big book around all of us. I mean, and the two of them together were not only an attraction, but had a lot of depth. And Lester worked very, very hard in developing PALS. And she spoke occasionally to us, and in addition to that, she was always available to talk to the wives. Another advantage that Lester had, in addition to his wife, who I'm going to give just credit to, as well as his personality, was the fact that in his job with the Attorney General's office, he did traverse our state and met many, many attorneys. He was known by everybody. He was known by the bar, and of course, he never, to my knowledge, he had no anonymity, absolutely none. And lawyers, judges, clerks, I might add, who knew folks that within the bar that could use his help personally as an individual, somebody to talk to, as well as the help of pals, always funneled folks to him. That was my experience.
And as I understand, some of the early members were probably Earl Purser in Raleigh and Bob Spence in Eastern North Carolina and Herb Thorpe. But those were some of the early PALS members. But by 1985, they had gathered 28 members of PALS. And I guess I was one of them because I went to that 1985 meeting. I think it was in February at the Pinehurst Hotel in Pinehurst. And Lester Chalmers picked up Wilbur Mills at the Raleigh-Durham Airport, and they drove down to Pinehurst that Friday night, and we all had dinner. And Wilbur Mills shared his story of recovery. Wilbur Mills had been the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and had suffered from this illness of alcoholism and had recovered and had a great, it was a very inspiring talk, and it illustrated for me that it didn't matter from what circumstances you came from. Alcoholism is a kind of a universal illness. I mean, there are people in recovery from Yale to jail, and I think Wilbur Mills was no different than anybody else. He just happened to be chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Well, yeah, somebody at the table asked Wilbur Mills about, I recall that one of the wives said, "Tell me about Fanny Fox." And I thought I was going to crawl under the table when that question was asked, but he just laughed and he said, "Well, you know, I really can't remember because I was in a blackout." And you know, a blackout is not an unusual condition for somebody in the advanced stages of alcoholism. So that's probably a pretty accurate answer. Yeah, I think that Wilbur Mills coming to that meeting not only legitimatized PALS, but gave us a great boost.
One of the early decisions and points of discussion that we had on the LAP board, I remember vividly, was as we expanded from the PALS program dealing exclusively with addiction issues into this Friends program, which was dealing with the mental health issues, primarily depression, was whether we'd operate two separate programs with two separate teams of volunteers, two directors, just in two entirely different programs, or whether we could somehow combine them. I remember we spent a great deal of time discussing that, and the decision was finally made to have one program, I guess the Lawyer Assistance Program, as an umbrella, and underneath it there would be the two components. Each of those separate programs would have their own team of volunteers, and so if any lawyer came into the program for whatever issue he had, they'd be maybe directed to the PALS side or the Friends side, and possibly there would be lawyers who would need help in both issues, but on both sides of the program. But the decision was made to have one program with one head, and Don Carroll was the head, and we decided to hire someone who would be primarily focused on the Friend side, but would also be involved in the PAL side as well, so there'd be a lot of overlap, and we could address whatever issues came along with that one program.
Well, the Ethics Committee, in its wisdom, recognized that even though we had a rule that required lawyers to report misconduct, it would severely impair the ability for lawyers to be mutually supportive if in the confessional of a support group a disclosure was made that other lawyers in the group would be required to report from a disciplinary standpoint. So we got this opinion that that rule did not apply in the context of counseling that would take place in a support group, which allowed lawyers to work with each other. And I think it's critical for lawyers to be able to have support from other people who know the challenges they face, the special challenges they face. And so for us to be able to expand our support groups around the state so that it would be easy to get to. I mean, it's a large state, North Carolina, and if you're in the far eastern part and you need to go to a support group, you need to have one close by. And we had a limited number of support groups to start with, and with this rule, we were able to expand our reach. And I think just the recognition that this was something that was needed and people were willing to give their time and to participate in these groups, making them accessible was critical to the success of the program.
Ed Ward is the Lawyer Assistance Program Assistant Director. Ed has had the unique ability to help lawyers move from the chaos of addiction and depression into recovery. And he has also been a leader in establishing support groups across the state. Today, I think we have at least 17 support groups that meet around the state for lawyers who suffer from addiction, depression, and sometimes both of these illnesses. Tawanda Gardner is our Piedmont LAP coordinator. Tawanda, with skill and compassion, has taken the lead in reaching out to minority lawyers. She has also been the point person for reaching out to law students in our 7 law schools and helping them to understand that assistance is available to them as law students and that it is available when they become lawyers.
The nature of the stress that I encountered in law school was significant. Coming to law school is unlike anything most students ever experience, and it's very competitive, and also it's very humbling. It's stressful in discovering that you may not be the smartest person in the room anymore. And the competitive nature of it leads to overworking, studying constantly, very little sleep, not eating appropriately anymore, not exercising the way that I used to. And then also feelings of isolation, being away from family and friends and trying to make new friends in this new competitive environment. So there's significant stressors. Well, I wouldn't have been confident about applying for the bar exam if it was not for my participation in the LAP. So I think that a student who is struggling with substance abuse issues or mental health issues, it would be in their best interest to get involved with the Lawyers Assistance Program because you'll find that they are an advocate and are truly there to assist. And because of the confidentiality measures in place, you can do it with the confidence that your classmates aren't going to find out that I have a substance abuse problem or that I have a mental health issue. I think that a student could be confident that they can open up and come forward with these issues and get the help that they need and the support and the assistance that they need through the Lawyers Assistance Program and put themselves in a position to be more confident that they can be licensed. without the fear of their substance abuse issues or mental health issues being made known to their peers and colleagues and future employers.
I did. I went to a CLE in the spring of 2002, and I heard a former colleague from the federal defender system speak, and then and also a friend from law school that I hadn't seen in 30-plus years. And both of them talked about their depression and how they had begun to deal with it. And at first I thought about telling a friend about that because she was struggling with depression, and I was so in denial. I didn't think about it in relation to myself, but luckily the light bulb went off, and I thought, I need to do that too. Being a criminal defense lawyer was very stressful, and my experience was I dealt with the stress by just working harder and harder and harder, and just really ignoring the stress and using my work as a way to get away from the reality of the stress, I think, the consequences of the stress for me. What caused me to be able to finally acknowledge to myself that I was suffering severe depression and had for years was that other practitioners who were like me, particularly a former federal defender and somebody who had been a prosecutor and then a defense attorney. I knew both those people. And the fact that they could stand up and acknowledge that they had suffered severe depression, I think just gave me a freedom to say that. First to myself and then to come and ask for help. To me, the Lawyers Assistance Program meetings have been an amazing source of healing. I don't really know how the process works, but I know that it works, and I see it work for me. I see it work for other people in the group. It's a very supportive group. We really care about each other. We care what happens to each other. And something about the process of sharing and speaking aloud the things that are troubling us, and something about hearing other people for whom we have respect as colleagues and for whom we care as friends, something about that process of learning their troubles and knowing that they are surviving their troubles. It's just a very healing process.
I first became aware of the Lawyer Assistance Program when I was in law school at Wake Forest, and I believe it was Don Carroll who came to the school and gave a lecture, and I think we were all kind of forced to go, which was okay. After law school, I didn't have any more contact with the Lawyer Assistance Program until the end of 2004. I had just been in private practice, or just started my private practice, in the Winston-Salem Bar Association, which is an African-American-based bar in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. We were planning to do a mental health CLE because we saw a need for that within our own membership as well as the legal community at large in this county. So I contacted Don Carroll, and he helped us to put this program together. It was well received, it was well attended, and I think we all got a lot out of learning how to live less stressful lives as attorneys. A few months after that, I got a call from Tawanda Gardner, who at that time had just started her work as being the Piedmont area coordinator for the Lawyer Assistance Program. I believe our CLE was in January, and she started to work with the program in March, so she probably called me sometime during that summer. And we've been in cahoots since then. I've tried to be a resource to her as much as I can and bridge gaps and help brainstorm with her as she tries to, fill the need that we have here in our county especially. She did invite me to attend a friends meeting, and over the course of the past 5 years or so, I've tried to attend as many times as I can, and I, try to bring others with me because the more the merrier. We do have have a lot of stressful things that go on in our lives as attorneys, not just because of the workload itself or the subject matter, but just because people expect us to be, counselors, therapists, parents, shoulders to cry on, a big brother, a friend, and they expect us to do it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And at some point, we start to show the signs of wear. And the program is a good way to nip it in the bud so that we don't fall to pieces and get into trouble with our clients and our spouses and the bar and with the legal system ourselves. So we spend 3 years in law school learning how to think on our feet, to make quick decisions, to burn the candle at both ends, to just keep going like, the Energizer Bunny, but we're not taught how to take care of ourselves and to slow down. And sometimes it's not until it's too late that we realize, there's something not right here. And the mission of the Lawyers Assistance Program is to help us not get to the point that we are, when it's already too late.
And at some point, PALS did an event in Charlotte and invited the law schools to participate in the event. And the administration at Carolina knew my story and asked me to attend on behalf of the university along with a couple other people. I became a PALS volunteer, I think it was in my first year of law school. And I remember getting the letter from the president of the bar appointing me as a volunteer. And I remember Don saying, "Ash, you're the first law student that we've ever had as an actual volunteer in the PALS program." And I thought that was exciting to me. I enjoyed that distinction. And immediately in my first 2 or 3 years in PALS, and even while I was a law student, I went on a number of PALS calls with other PALS volunteers who were established practicing attorneys around the state. So I was immediately a volunteer and immediately very involved in the program. So at the same time I'm starting to get involved in PALS, this relationship with the Chief Justice gets started, and the two just dovetailed very nicely. At some point I wound up with a summer internship with the Chief Justice, helping him with issues related to the establishment of drug treatment courts in North Carolina. And at the same time I was doing that, I was continuing to be involved with PALS and increasing my involvement with PALS. And then when I graduated from law school, I had a clerkship with Justice Mitchell, and that was at about the same time as the PALS 20th year anniversary. And somewhere along the line, Don and I put our heads together and persuaded the Chief Justice to invite PALS to the Supreme Court for a real nice event, recognizing 20 years of service to the bar with PALS.
Well, when I became Chief Justice, we did have the Lawyers Assistance Program. It was the PALS program at that point. Primarily for alcoholics, and then it increased its scope as time went on. One thing about this whole program is it takes a lot of trust, a lot more than the ordinary bar program, so on. So, at any event, when I came in, I recognized that this program had been filling a need that had gone unmet probably for generations. And I frankly began to realize the magnitude of the problem within the general population, but even more so within the profession. That we have way more than our demographic share of alcoholics, substance abusers, and so on. So I just really fully realized along about then just how important the program is, and how vital it is to lawyers and to their families. An alcoholic or addict affects a lot of other lives, as every alcoholic knows, and as everybody who's in any of the support programs for families know. So it was, I thought, important that we raise its visibility within the bar and within the general community, within the medical community. So we decided on the 20th anniversary of the program that we would have the anniversary in the Supreme Court. We had never done that for any other group of the bar. But it was, as I say, it had been a labor of love by so many people for so long that I talked to the Supreme Court, and the court agreed. We had a reception for the PALS volunteers and the directors and staff, and to thank all those folks for their service, and that seemed. It seemed to really sort of encourage people. I've had a lot of people up to this day say that for them that was important to have the work recognized and the importance of recovery and the North Carolina State Bar's official participation in recovery recognized and applauded and increased. So I think it was a good day's work, but it's also led to a lot of good years' work by the director and staff and by the state bar leadership and the bar. And it is just, it's one thing that I think everybody in the bar, probably the only thing that the bar can agree on. You know, I mean, there's really incredible breadth and depth of knowledge among the ordinary members of the bar about the lawyer's assistance programs, more so I think than any other programs that we do. So it's just been a smashing success. It's a tribute to the members of the bar, and I like to say to the indomitable human spirit. We keep on coming back no matter how much we mess ourselves up. We keep on pulling back and pulling each other back. It's very heartwarming and inspirational.
The North Carolina Lawyer Assistance Program Chief Justice's Service Award has been awarded to the following individuals: Ernie Machen, Phil Howerton, Earl Purser, Justice John Webb, Bill Cruz, Steve Philo, Mary Ellen Woodleaf, Henry Sloan, Stacy Phipps, Mark Ward, Charles Royster, Ed Henson, Jana Lucas, Chris Godwin, Fred Williams, and Kathy Klotzberger.
I began with marijuana when I was 17 or 18 years of age and quickly became habituated to smoking pot. I smoked every day of my life until I was 34 years old. When I was at Carolina undergraduate school from 1972 to 1976, there was everything there: Valium and LSD and mescaline and peyote and lots of marijuana. I had a roommate that had a never-ending prescription to Valium, and so I really did more drugs than I drank, although drinking was part of my life. And law school, I smoked pot every day, but only marijuana and alcohol. And then when I got into private practice, I began working for a private firm in 1981, and my managing partner's secretary was a cocaine dealer. And so I laced the cocaine in with the marijuana and the alcohol, and my wife's mom had a Xanax prescription, and so I was doing Xanax, and my dad's a retired medical doctor, and he had all kinds of stuff in his medicine cabinet at his house, and I was a daily pot smoker, and at one point in my life I became a daily cocaine user, and I was definitely a daily drinker. And it was just part of the culture that I involved myself in. It's part of what the people that I hung around with did on a daily basis. I was using the effect that my drug use had on my practice was so very cunning and so very subtle that I didn't really notice it. If you had asked me in the height of my drug and alcohol abuse if my drugs and alcohol were affecting my ability to practice law, I would have honestly told you that I did not think that it did. It came to a head when someone, I don't know who, talked to a few lawyers who were a part of the PALS committee and told them that they were concerned about my drinking and that they had heard rumors that I was involved with cocaine use. And these two lawyers came to visit me in the latter part of November of 1988. So they told me they were alcoholics, and this was on a Monday, and they left, and I was very mad that they had invaded my personal space and told me that there were consequences if my drinking and drugging affected my practice. And Friday of that week, I got a target letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office inviting me to testify in front of a grand jury about my involvement with drugs in my community. And I called one of these two guys back and said, I thought I remember you offering to help me while you were threatening to take my law license, and can you help me? I need some help. And I went to treatment, and there was no relationship between the PALS visit and my letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office. I do not believe that either of these two lawyers had any idea that I was the target of an undercover drug investigation by the federal government when they came to see me. They were just concerned because of some reports they had had from some other lawyers in the community where I practice law that I was drinking and drugging to excess. Herb Thorpe, who is now deceased, was one of the lawyers that came to see me. He was very intuitive about polyaddiction. He knew from the beginning that there really wasn't much difference between addiction to cocaine and addiction to alcohol. It was just a matter of culture and availability and certainly choice, but an addicted person, you know, whatever it takes to get through the night, they're going to use it. That's been my experience. And that Herb was the chairperson of a committee that was instrumental in getting the state bar to treat alcoholism and drug addiction pretty much the same, and not to automatically treat a drug addiction with a grievance. They didn't automatically file a grievance against somebody who either admitted or was caught by the law using illegal drugs. Well, let me tell you how I got my license back, okay? Because in addition to being broke and using food stamps and trying to support a family of 4 on very little income, my wife was working. I was also going to 12-step programs and doing what I was supposed to do with regard to probation, and I was trying to help other people get sober, and I was working very closely with the 2 PALS volunteers who had come to see me prior to my being arrested. I was rocking along with my $3,000 a year job, and in July of 1990, I got a letter in the mail. Well, actually, it was probably in June of 1990. I got a letter in the mail from the state bar that said, please apply for your license. And I went, okay, so I applied for my license. And 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a letter saying that they were going to let me practice law again. So I actually was relicensed to practice law on July 1st of 1990, a year later. In 1991, the drug amnesty rule was adopted by the state bar, perhaps as a result of my experience. I believe that shortly after I came through, there were some other lawyers who came into the spotlight of PALS or the state bar that were poly-addicted. Absolutely. The amnesty program allows me to continue to be a recovering lawyer. If it weren't for the amnesty program, me and other guys and ladies might not be lawyers anymore. And it helps for me to be a lawyer when I'm going to a lawyer who is addicted to be a lawyer. I mean, it's all part of it because I can speak the same language as they do. I know their culture. I know what their life is like. If I were not a lawyer, if I was a house painter going to a lawyer, they might not listen to me. I mean, they just might not listen to me because we alcoholics and addicts always look for ways to distinguish ourselves from other people so that we can continue to drink and drug.
Either Eddie Morrell or Lester came up with the idea of having some funds available to help this suffering alcoholic attorney, because quite often by the time we came across them, they were, if not penniless, pretty close to it. And I was asked to head up a committee. There were 3 of us, if I remember, to study the problem and make recommendations to IALTA for funding. We worked on that for about a year. I remember, I wish I could find that opus of a report, but we wrote a report to go along with filling out all of the forms and applications, and waited silently for at least a year. I can remember thinking and to myself and saying to 1 or 2 of the committee members, I think they've forgotten us. I don't think they thought much of either our report or our application. But as it turned out, it was the beginning. And through the years, I believe it has been helpful to many attorneys. My observation is it's much more stressful to practice law today than it ever was. You know, the stress that's placed on us by the courts and by the whole judicial system in itself is tremendously greater than it was 25 years ago. I can guarantee you that.
Well, I think it's fair to say I was in a mess. I was just really depressed. I think, you know, in reflecting back over my life, I think probably most of my life I've been in some degree depressed. I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think a lot of that could be attributed to a lot of anger, not understanding why I couldn't do certain things. You know, ultimately I figured out that it was ADD that kept me from being able to do certain things, but for most of my life I explained that away as having some sort of character defect. I was lazy, or I was uninspired, or I wasn't smart enough, and so a lot of that I sort of learned to turn into that anger inward and sort of beat myself up, and always I think kept a certain amount of depression or self-loathing going on. But it finally hit its peak about 3.5 years ago, nearly 4 years ago. About this time, I got to the point where I quit leaving the house. I would call my friends to cover for me at the courthouse. If I couldn't get them to cover for me at the courthouse, then I would get dressed, go to the courthouse, continue all my cases as quickly as I could, and then come straight back home. I was staying up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't go to sleep. You know, I didn't like the things that I would hear in my head when I would lay down, so I'd stay up, I'd watch TV, I'd stay on the computer. You know, I would play computer games until, you know, just mindless things just to keep myself from thinking. So as I became involved in the Lawyer's Assistance Program, you know, very early on, my therapist said, the best and quickest way we can get you on a path of wellness is to get you out of here and get you in a residential facility where you can go and just work on yourself. And you know, first of all, no one wants to go to that. No one's going to volunteer for that initially, and I didn't want to go. And so I managed to find a truth, and it was absolutely true, that I couldn't afford to go. But that truth also helped me enable me to say no to something that I didn't particularly want to do. The form of the assistance that I got from the LAP Foundation in terms of financial assistance was a loan, interest-free loan that paid, because as most of us would suspect, that money had to be paid ahead of time. I didn't have insurance, which again is another very anxiety-producing circumstance. So you couple that with the fact that I'm not going to work and I'm not generating income. I didn't have, a stash of money. In fact, it was week to week for me, day to day sometimes, is whether I was even going to be able to pay my rent. So having to fork over in excess of $10,000 was just more than I could fathom. So the fact that, when Ed Ward came to me, to my town, and met with me privately and said, I have the authorization, I can write the check for the entire amount, I'm sure the look on my face was priceless. But his only response to me was, when are you going? And the freedom that kind of circumstance gives a person, that it gave me, was so liberating. It removed all of my excuses, but it also put me in a place where I got help that I could not have gotten any other way. And for that, I could never repay. I mean, I could give 10 times that amount of money back to the LAP Foundation as a contribution, but it would never repay what that amount of money at that time in my life meant for me. If somebody came to me and said, I'm not doing well and I'm thinking about calling a Lawyers Assistance Program, I don't think I would just tell them that's a good idea. I would probably take them by the hand and take them to the phone and pick up the phone and call somebody like an Ed Ward or you or someone. I would pick up the phone and help them and get them there. That's how strongly I feel about the program and how capable the Lawyers Assistance Program is in providing care and assistance and support for lawyers who are in trouble. Just because we're lawyers doesn't make us immune from the hardships of life. Although I think the way we're trained as lawyers, we somehow have bought into an untruth that we are supposed to be immune to all of the things that make life hard. I think we're trained to fix problems, and we are perplexed to the point of maybe it being our downfall that we can't fix our own problems sometimes.
Well, of course, judges as well as lawyers can have alcohol problems, and the problem, though, from Powell's perspective, was having a lawyer call on a judge, or two Powell's members who are lawyers calling on a judge, telling him he's got a problem and got to do something about it when maybe they have to appear before this judge. So it was a tough situation, and that got remedied in the early 90s. The state bar set up a subcommittee of Powell's, a judiciary subcommittee, and that was promulgated by Cliff Johnson, the late Cliff Johnson, who was a Court of Appeals judge at that time. Yeah, I think that the hallmark of Powell's and LAP, Lawyers Assistance Programs that exist today, is confidentiality. I think that's the most important criteria, and we have various criteria, but I think that that's the most important one, because without that, you don't have trust. I think a lawyer has to know that when he calls that 1-800-PALS number, that he can do that in confidence, and he's seeking help, and what he says is kept confidential and is in no way turned over to any other bar committee or ethics or anything else. And I think that serves the lawyer, it serves the bar, and it serves the public, because if we can get somebody who has a drug or alcohol problem and they get into recovery, everybody wins.
The confidentiality aspect of the program is one of the things that made me willing to come, because it's like speaking with a therapist or speaking to a doctor or speaking to a lawyer. I know that anything I say inside that meeting is going to be kept inside that meeting.
And then when it came to the question of confidentiality in the work I did as a PALS volunteer, the work I did with lawyers, licensed attorneys in North Carolina who may be in need of some help, you know, it's pretty clear pretty quickly in every encounter I've had that that's a big concern to most people who might want help is, I kind of like to have some help, but can we keep this on the QT? And the way the charter, so to speak, of PALS is constructed, I have the ability to say to somebody, yes, you have absolute confidentiality. The conversations that we have come under the attorney-client privilege, and I can no more divulge this information in a way that would cause harm to you than I could in a traditional attorney-client relationship.
Getting well, seeking help is a choice. And there was a wise old man who knew all things, and a young, smart-alecky attorney like me one day decided he would fool the old man. He said, I'm going to catch a bird. I'll hold it in my hands. And he said, I'm going to the wise old man, and I'm going to ask him, is the bird in my hands alive or dead? And if he says it's alive, I'll real quick crush it. And if he says it's dead, I'll open my hands and let the bird go free. And so the day came, and he caught the bird, and he went to the wise man. He says, oh, wise one, you know all things. Is the bird in my hand alive or dead? And the wise man looked at him serenely and smiled and said, as you wish. And so my wish for others, the other attorneys in this world, is that they will choose to open their hands and let the bird go free and choose to get well.
Thank you for your participation in the history of the Lawyer Assistance Program. I hope you have seen how the lives of certain individuals have brought to life changes and a dynamic process by which the needs of North Carolina lawyers can better be met, and how confidential assistance can be available to all North Carolina lawyers who might need it. We've seen how the PALS Revolving Loan Fund was established to assist lawyers who needed financial help to get treatment that was needed. We've seen how the Bar Council adopted a drug amnesty provision so that illegal drugs could be considered in the same vein as the legal drug of alcohol for those who suffer from addiction. We've seen how the bar changed the rules so that they adopted a grievance deferral rule so that minor issues which may have their origin in mental health or addictive processes can be addressed, and assistance can be provided by the Lawyer Assistance Program. We've also seen how the program has expanded to assist judges and meet their special needs by a special judicial subcommittee. Of course, one of the biggest changes that occurred in the history of the Lawyer Assistance Program was its expansion to deal with mental health issues, especially depression, along with addiction. You've seen the celebration we had after 20 years of growth of the Lawyer Assistance Program, and how with a reception in the Supreme Court, the program sort of became of age and became much more accepted throughout the state by judges and lawyers. And you've seen how there has been the ongoing effort to reach out, particularly to minority members of the bar who might need assistance, as well as law students, so that assistance can be provided to law students before they become members of the bar, so that problems can be addressed then rather than later. As always, we know with any medical issues, the sooner help is provided, the better the long-term outcome. I hope you have seen through the lives and the discussions by these individuals how this program has emerged and how it can be a resource for you today, and that how you can take your understanding of what is available to you through the Lawyer Assistance Program and use that as a resource in your life, and also to help those other members of the profession that you practice with every day. Thank you.
Living a life that's not based on self-centeredness. Freedom. That's the word that comes to my mind, is freedom. And it's kind of backwards from what you would think, and a lot of recovery is kind of counterintuitive. by not focusing on myself as much and caring more about the other people, I feel a heck of a lot better about myself all the time. I'm going to cry if I keep talking about it. I would have never thought that the program would have done all this. I came involved in the Lawyers Assistance Program, again, somewhat voluntarily, somewhat involuntarily, to stop drinking. The life that it's given me is beyond what I could have ever imagined. And that is no overstatement. My life is freaking incredible right now. It is absolutely great. There's no way I could have scripted this out. Okay? So yeah, I'm not based on selfishness. I don't care about getting this end that I thought would make me feel better. And that's what it was for me. A whole lot of it was, if I get all these external things, they'll make me feel better about myself. Whether it's a different woman, a different car, a different watch on my wrist, something more out external to make me feel better about myself. The program's principle is based on internal growth and spiritual growth and doing the next right thing and caring about your other lawyers and other people just in general and treating people with respect and dignity and honesty and not trying to manipulate or control folks. And what's been the fruit of that, for me at least, has been I feel a whole lot better about myself. Again, I can look you in the eye. I feel whole. I feel complete. There are a lot of things externally that if you were to look at me have changed too. I've gotten married. I've got a booming law practice. You know, all those external things are great, but they're all a result of what's coming from the inside. And that's what the program's given me.